Welcome to the Sensory Integration lesson. Before diving into our content, let's view this video to preview a number of key terms that will come up during the lecture. You may already know some of the terms, or you may not. Either one is okay. Don't worry about memorizing this information. We'll revisit it throughout today's class. For now, just focus on building your familiarity with the vocabulary of sensory integration. Here's an overview of the terms we will be covering during this video. I know it looks like a lot, but don't worry. I'll be guiding you through the concepts one at a time. Today we'll be looking at sensory integration terminology in three areas: sensory processing, principles of intervention, and SI outcomes. In the first area, we have terms related to sensory processing as seen on the left side of this screen in blue. This vocabulary introduces the topic of sensory integration, which is also called SI for short. Our starting point is the senses. As you're probably already aware, we have 5 commonly known senses: vision, hearing, taste, smell, and touch. We also have 3 lesser-known senses: interoception, proprioception, and vestibular. The first of these lesser-known senses, interoception, involves the sensations we feel internally in our bodies, through the viscera. Examples of interoception include feeling a fullness in the bladder if we need to urinate, or feeling an emptiness in the stomach when we are hungry. Interoception also signals pain and other bodily states. The next is proprioception, a sensory system that provides information about the length, position, and tension of our muscles and joints. It tells us about our body position and where we are in relationship to objects and people in our environment. For example, say you wanted to pick up a glass of water off a table. Our proprioceptive system tells us the angle to reach our arm and the position our fingers need to be in to grasp the glass effectively. Then, proprioceptors let us know how hard to grip the glass so that it doesn't slip through our fingers or break from using too much pressure. Proprioceptive input contributes to motor skill and self-regulation. Last is our vestibular system, which provides information about balance, posture, and our body orientation in space. Vestibular receptors are located in our inner ears, and they respond to head movement. So this system also helps us stabilize our vision even when our head is in motion. We use our vestibular system for any physical activity that requires balance, like skating, dancing, standing on tiptoes, or jumping. We know that our vestibular system is overloaded when we get dizzy or experience motion sickness. Vestibular input contributes to motor skill and self-regulation. Now that we've reviewed the senses, we need to explore the process of how we use them. The first step is perception, which for our purposes simply means the process of becoming aware of something through our senses. An aspect of perception, registration, is the brain's unconscious ability to take in information from all of our senses and select which input will receive attention and which will be disregarded. In other words, it's what our brains decide to notice. As a general rule, we tend to register novelty. For example, we register movement, like when we see a bird flying by. We register unexpected sounds, like when we hear a siren behind us when we're in the car. We even register smells, like if we come into the house and smell chocolate chip cookies baking. When sensory input is familiar and expected, we tend to pay less attention to it. Another part of perception, discrimination, is our ability to interpret and differentiate the quality and type of sensory input from our senses. For example, visual discrimination helps a child differentiate a lowercase b from a d when reading. And tactile discrimination lets us recognize an object by touch without using our vision. If we reach into a grocery bag and touch something round, we can discriminate between a peach, an apple, or a turnip. Next is modulation. We sometimes think of modulation like the volume and tuning knob functions on a radio. Modulation is the process of self-organizing our nervous system. We try to regulate our responses to sensory input despite changes in the intensity of incoming sensation from our bodies or from the environment. It's our effort to regulate the quality and intensity of incoming sensation. Modulation is sometimes called sensory reactivity. And here comes the central term of our work today, sensory integration. Dr. Jean Ayres, the founder of SI, said that sensory integration is the neurological process that organizes sensations from one's body and from the environment and makes it possible to use the body effectively in the environment. In other words, it's how our brains put together all the information our senses are perceiving so that our body can do its thing. Now we will change gears and learn about 4 big ideas related to how we use sensory integration treatment to help people with SI difficulties. Collectively, we'll call these the principles of intervention, as you can see in the purple box in the middle of the screen. First, intrinsic motivation is when someone is driven by internal rather than external rewards. For example, a child's innate desire to play and to master engaging challenges is an intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is necessary for SI interventions to work. Second, Therapeutic Alliance happens between a therapist and a client in the intervention setting. It is a relationship characterized by mutual respect, collaboration, trust, and emotional safety. These factors are vital for the therapeutic process. Third, a Just Right challenge is an activity that can help us build new skills and abilities while simultaneously being responsive and adjustable to our current level of functioning. We might think of this as a Goldilocks activity. It's not too hard, it's not too easy, but just right. The SI therapist helps create the Just Right challenge and thus facilitates sensory integration. Finally, an adaptive response is any purposeful, goal-directed counteraction to a sensory experience. For example, a baby sees a rattle and reaches for it. Reaching is a basic adaptive response. Adaptive responses become more complex as a client builds skills, and they signal that sensory integration is increasing. Notice how all of these principles are connected to sensory integration. Now let's shift gears one more time and look at the terms that reflect some of the desired outcomes of sensory integration. This information is in green on the right side of the screen. The first and most basic outcome of SI is called optimal arousal. This type of arousal is about one's level of alertness. Optimal arousal is our ability to achieve and change levels of alertness to meet the demands of a situation. Having optimal arousal, or at least aiming towards optimal arousal, is a necessary ingredient for adaptive responses. Next, praxis is a motor or muscle-based outcome of SI. Praxis is the ability to conceptualize, plan, and execute skilled physical tasks, supported through sensory processing and integration. In other words, praxis is key for performing all physical activity in an effective way. A counterpoint to praxis, self-regulation, is a behavioral outcome of SI. It is an organized state of attention and arousal that allows us to adapt our behavior to match the demands of the environment. For example, say we're sitting at a park and a bug runs across our bare foot. Our tactile system goes into emergency mode to determine if we're in danger. Then, even though our foot feels all creepy-crawly, our vision kicks in and we see that it's just a little insect. We self-regulate to calm our nervous system so that we can go back to enjoying our picnic at the park. Optimal arousal, praxis, and self-regulation are all outcomes of sensory integration. Subsequently, a bigger outcome of SI is to make lasting and beneficial changes to our nervous system. When we change our nervous system in response to our experiences, this is called neuroplasticity. A common example of neuroplasticity is when a person undergoes rehab and regains brain function and movement after having had a stroke. SI activities promote neuroplasticity. A final SI outcome is occupational engagement. This goal is more global. It reflects how SI can facilitate our ability to participate in meaningful, everyday pursuits. Things like activities of daily living, work and education, play and leisure, and rest and sleep. Participating in these activities also supports and builds our sense of self-esteem and self-worth. Occupational engagement, as assisted by sensory integration and neuroplasticity, is critical for our health and well-being. As you can see, sensory processing, principles of intervention, and SI outcomes are aspects of the larger topic of sensory integration theory, and these concepts all contribute to sensory integration. Now that you've gotten a sneak peek at the basic terms surrounding sensory integration, let's dive into the details and consider how SI affects real people in real situations.